The Eminence in Shadow is an Izukai action comedy manga based off of a novel by Daisuke Aizawa. With an anime adaptation set to premiere this year, I decided to check out the first volume of the manga to see if it might be worth watching. Just like the last couple of Izukai manga I've checked out, this one has a unique premise. If you've seen the trailer for the anime and don't know anything about the novel or manga, you likely have a false impression of how this show will be. I feel like the trailer is purposefully misleading. It highlights that there will be action and sets a dark, serious tone, but isn't cluing the audience in on a comedic angle that will also be there. There are some typical Izukai tropes in the story, such as the protagonist Sid Kagano being incredibly powerful and the fact that he gets hit by a truck prior to his reincarnation. There are a couple of things that make this manga unique compared to others in the genre, one of which is its unconventional main character. Prior to his reincarnation, Sid devoted his life to becoming what he refers to as a Eminence in Shadow. His dream has always been to become a powerful figure shrouded in mystery that works in secret. In order to become the person he wanted to be, Sid began training and learning everything he could, but eventually realized his mortal limitations. In the pursuit of obtaining power that could overcome human limitations, Sid is killed and reborn into a fantasy world. Still determined to achieve his goal, Sid continues to work toward becoming the man he wants to be in his new life. One night, after defeating some bandits in the forest, he inadvertently saves an elf girl suffering from a disease who he gives the name Alpha. She is grateful to Sid and is willing to do anything to repay him, so he decides to recruit her into his fake organization, the Shadow Garden, and comes up with a goal for them to strive toward. He claims that their objective is to stop a cult from reviving a demon from a fairy tale. As the years go by and the Shadow Garden grows in number, Sid continues on his path to becoming the Eminence in Shadow. Like I stated before, Sid is not your typical Izukai protagonist. I appreciate the fact that Aizawa didn't give him a standard neat or shut-in backstory, and although he uses the tired main character gets hit by a truck trope, the way it's executed was very funny. Sid is written as one of those cool, overpowered Izukai characters, but unlike most protagonists in the genre, he doesn't show his true strength nor his intelligence openly. One of the requirements to becoming the perfect shadow broker he desires to be is that others perceive him as a forgettable nobody. He tries his best to not stand out and essentially become a background character. This requires him to put on a facade of mediocrity around everyone outside of the Shadow Garden. Sid is a very self-serving and deceptive character that basically goes around pretending to be something he's not. This is such a refreshing take on an Izukai protagonist, and I love that he wasn't written as a standard hero. There are times where Sid's actions and thoughts are very unheroic, and the author points this out on several occasions. The character isn't really a hero, nor is he a villain. He's much closer to an anti-hero operating in a morally gray area. Another element of this manga that separates it from others in the genre is the way that the main threat is handled. The interesting hook to this story is that while Sid is deceiving others around him, he remains oblivious to the fact that the stuff that he came up with is actually real. He's under the impression that everyone in the Shadow Garden is on the same page as him and are just pretending like there is some evil cult out there while taking out bandits. Throughout Volume 1, Sid unwittingly takes out members of the cult as Alpha and the other members gather intelligence on their whereabouts and the scheme to revive the demon Diablos. Even when he's around the members of his organization, Sid is constantly putting on an act that the others buy into without question. His ignorance about the whole situation and his inner commentary regarding his members and his daily life is very funny. Unfortunately, there isn't much to say about the members of the Shadow Garden. Only two members, Alpha and Beta, are introduced, with another member, Delta, being referenced briefly. Alpha is very devoted to the cause and works hard to stop the cult, while Beta seems to be in total admiration of Sid. Aside from Sid's allies, there were several other notable characters introduced, like his sister Claire, the sword instructor at the school he attends named Marquess Xenon, and the princesses Alexia and Iris Midgar. I liked how Claire was written as the older, loving, protective sister that really gets swept up in her anger when pissed off. I wouldn't describe the character as hot-headed, but she seems like the type of character that would act out in rage if not stopped. Marquess is depicted as a respected swordsman, beloved by his students, and appears to be a very nice guy. Alexia Midgar is my favorite character alongside Sid, and is much more fleshed out than the majority of the cast so far. I won't say too much about this character to avoid spoiling anything. She's very similar to Sid in a couple ways and is generally compared to her older sister Iris, who is considered the strongest swordsman in the nation. The chapter that Alexia is introduced in was very entertaining despite the fact that I could predict where the story was going at certain points. The interaction between Alexia and Sid by the end of chapter 3 is excellent. They're honestly a perfect match for each other, and the dynamic between them leads to some of the funniest moments in the book. Chapter 3 was such a nice change of pace from how the first 2 chapters played out, and I'm so glad that the author included a character that can get under Sid's skin. Volume 1 consists of 4 short chapters around 38 pages each, and a special section which includes a short story. Over the last couple weeks, I read this manga twice. I initially read it through fan-translated scans online before I decided to buy a physical copy of the book. When reading the official release, I noticed many differences not just with some of the writing, but with the artwork as well. This is the first time where I've read the published version of a manga, and it contained content that is noticeably different from the scans available online. The fan translation is a lot better than what I've read recently with other manga. There were some grammatical mistakes and minor errors, but they occurred very infrequently. The phrasing of the dialogue was usually good, apart from a couple of lines, one of which made no sense in the context of what was going on. Near the end of chapter 3, there were a few lines from Alexia that I thought were better in the fan translation. There were even a handful of times where the fan translation was very close or even identical to the official release. As you might expect, the official release has much better, more streamlined dialogue, with only one possible minor error. The writing is a lot less repetitive in the published copy than in the translated scans, particularly in chapter 1 where the phrase shadow broker is often substituted for shadow eminence. The official release includes updated or additional artwork by artist Henri Sakano. When I first started reading the online scans, I wasn't too impressed with the quality of the artwork, although it got better later on. Some of the artwork in the published book is much more detailed than the scanned versions, and some even include more effects for the action panels. Sometimes a page might contain a couple of panels that differ from the scanned version. In some instances, entire pages are completely different, both in terms of the page layout and the artwork. In chapter 4, not only is the artwork different on multiple pages, but an entire scene between Alexia and Sid is executed differently as well. The outcome is the same, but the event leading up to it and the conversation between them has been changed. In the unofficial version, the way Sid is written in this particular instance really paints him in a negative light given what he says to her. There's a point where he says something to Alexia that catches her off guard, but he doesn't elaborate on it. However, in the official release, things occur differently with his dialogue changed and more context is added with the additional panels. This version does a better job of emphasizing one similarity between them and shows how Sid can relate to her in one particular way. Regardless of the changes to the panel layouts, it was easy to follow the arrangement on each page. Most of the action occurs within the first 2 chapters, with chapters 3 and 4 focusing on Sid's time at the Royal Capital School. The action was easy to follow, and the manga is much more violent and bloodier than I expected it to be. The first volume ends without any resolution to the situation that occurs in the last chapter. I'm very interested to see what happens next, to the point where once I finish, I almost started to read the next volume. Overall, The Eminence in Shadow is a very funny isekai manga that takes a unique approach with its protagonist and main threat. I definitely would recommend reading this book if you're looking for something different to read within the isekai genre. If you've read this manga, let me know what you guys thought about it in the comment section below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. I'm out of here. Peace.